thank you very much for joining us today on our Fair Tips Talks. This is the webinar for the reaction on the final code of practice that was released on Monday, the 22nd of April. We've got some fantastic guests joining us today. For those that don't know me, I'm Dan Hawkey. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer here over at TipJar. Obviously, we supply a lot of the sector with our Tronc and tipping solution, but ultimately helping with employee engagement and retention throughout the sector, supporting a lot of businesses through the upcoming legislation and moving forward. I'll hand over to my esteemed guests that are joining us today to do introductions to themselves. Over to you, Danielle.
Hi, I'm Danielle and I'm Head of Reward at Revolution Bars Group. We have circa 80 venues and about 3,000 staff all across the UK.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Hammond. I've been working in the field of hospitality for over 25 years, advising clients and operators on anything and everything to do with tips, service charge, troncs, compliance, NI, efficiencies, but obviously most latterly the new legislation. So I head up a consultancy called the Tronc Advisor and work very closely with Dan in the industry. Looking forward to some good conversation on the back of this final code being finally issued.
Brilliant. And last but not least, Chris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris Moores. I'm a people consultant. I've got over 25 years in the business, probably even more than that. But I'm currently working with a company called Grosvenor Pubs and Inns. We've got 10 sites across Surrey, Hampshire, and into the Cotswolds. So tend to be very food-led. And I also work with the other businesses within Red Lion Holdings. So looking forward to today.
Brilliant. So thanks again for all of you for joining us today. I guess we should start with the expert himself, Mr. Haman. Andy, with the final code of practice being released on Monday, what are your takeaways from it?
Obviously very welcome to get it at last. I guess a lot of cynical views on whether we would get it in time for the 1st of July, but that doesn't matter anymore, of course, because I think a number of key points. The first one being not a lot has changed in what's been published as the final version, apart from there's been a delay from the 1st of July to the 1st of October for its sort of go live date, so implementation date, which government will say that is obviously to help them still in their preparation time get it through Parliament into legislation itself, but equally to give a bit more time for operators, which I think is welcome because it is and was getting close to the mark. In terms of key takeaways, certainly a small amendment or clarification on agency workers, which either will interest people or won't, depending whether you use agencies, of course, or you don't. We can probably come on to that as we go through this webinar, but it's given a little bit of clarity in terms of who's responsible for what. We could probably still do with a bit more, to be honest. There is still a non-statutory guide to come out. No news on when that might be published. Again, that's always been suggested to be the sort of the commercial, how to practically apply this code. There's a few other pieces in there around policies and engaging with your workforce, but otherwise it is still fairness, transparency, everything else we all know about. 100% paid out, can't retain anything, can't carry any monies forward. So we've got an extra 3 months, but we're still in the countdown, really.
Brilliant. And in terms of an operator standpoint on this, Danielle and Chris, what are your thoughts on the final code of practice?
From my point of view, the extension to October is obviously welcome to have a little bit of extra time to get into the granular of some of the nuances, like agency, as Andy mentioned. I think we're quite late on in the extending the deadline. So, those businesses, as I imagine many hospitality businesses out there have been working on this for months and what potential changes are, and some of these things, balls, are already in motion. So the extension isn't that useful at this late stage, though. For ironing out the particulars, I'm glad we've got a little bit more time to understand agency specifically.
Gives you a bit of breathing space, doesn't it, in terms of making sure that, if you go live on July the 1st still, then at least any of those small little bits and pieces that might need to change over the coming months will be fully ironed out by October the 1st.
Absolutely.
And what about yourself, Chris?
I think I would back up what Danielle said. It gives you the extra time to try it out. We will have gone live. Well, we've always given 100% of our tips anyway, but it will give us that chance to iron it out in terms of information. We'll be working with TipJar, who have been really helpful with us in terms of particularly for report writing and that kind of thing. We've got an outsourced finance department as well, so we need that help. So it's really good that people are supporting in that way. But in terms of the legislation, there's not too much different we could do with more clarity on the agency side. It's helped a bit, but that is an issue that any business that's primarily food based will have an issue, particularly in the south of England.
Yeah. And is that one of the key challenges that you would see from the code of practice, just in terms of how you will manage agency workers moving forward? And do you have any ideas yet on how that would be managed within Grosvenor?
It's a bit of a challenge because we would rather employ our teams, and anything that pushes them towards working in agency is an issue. We want to recruit and retain people. We've worked very hard on making our benefits package and the way that we communicate and reward and involve our teams back of house and front of house. So anything they can do to clarify that, it's this idea of self-employment. So if you're an independent agency worker, we now understand about that. But if you're employed by a company that supplies agencies, it still needs clarification, in my view.
Yeah, definitely. What about yourself, Danielle? Is agency workers a big makeup at Revolution's Bar Group, or not big, but still a challenging one that you'll have to overcome a change in tact on this? Yeah,
it's not a huge makeup of our teams. I guess I echo Chris's sentiments there. In terms of, we would much rather have these guys as colleagues, and that's the distinction that we try to make as, kind of reward professionals on the benefits of being part of a group and part of a culture. And I think that's just one less distinction, which is complicated. And I think beyond that, it's the practicality that I'm unsure of as yet. At what line is the agency worker drawn? We have Peach Pubs down in the south of England, and they do rely more heavily than our bars estate, for example, on chefs and agencies, just because of challenges in recruitment in that space. And in terms of being able to get the appropriate, your invoice on after the fact date, how you're getting your hours being pulled in. They're not on rotas naturally, because they'd have to be on personnel systems, and that's solely where you house your employees. So there's some challenges in practicalities that I'm just not clear currently how we're going to get around. But yeah, hopefully, Andy, there's some of that, nuance that you'll be able to help with, especially with our partnership with TipJar. But I imagine there's still lots more that we're expecting, really, in terms of guidance and clarification.
Yeah, no, I was going to say as well, it's interesting. I've heard a lot of operators talking about how like their ideal scenario in previous trunk schemes had maybe been that there's a signing off process in terms of where people might start to earn tronc. So within their first couple of weeks of employment, they might not earn tronc. It may be when they get signed off as being a mixologist or a server or someone at the pass in the kitchen that they're signed off on those processes. Is that something that you believe would be viable under the new code of practice, Andy, in terms of how that could differentiate between agency staff being paid tips and not?
Yeah, definitely. I think the key first point is do not exclude agency staff, in their entirety. The legislation says they have an entitlement. It's what that entitlement looks like, and that's really, I guess, quite subjective depending on how you operate. So there's some key initial points, which is they have a right to see the policy. They have a right to understand the tips they might receive so that they can challenge it if they want. They still, although they're not your employee, they still have rights under this legislation to question, if they want to, how their tips have been calculated. So and this all sort of segues together really in terms of your policy needs to be robust and tight and explain how agency workers will be entitled or paid. But that might not look anything like the same as in your employed people will be paid. So factors to be taken into account, as you say, Dan. Do they have a waiting period? The first couple of weeks. Do they have to pass any sort of tests? Are they just turning up for a shift and you might never see them again? And one other thing that came out even just this morning is the intention that your staff should be involved in how the policy is structured. So you get them on side, hopefully, proactively rather than reactively. There may be an unintended kickback that the staff say, we don't think agency workers, even though they might be working alongside us, should get the same as we do. So there's so many factors to build into this. As Danielle alluded to, there's still a lot more in terms of practicality that we need to understand.
Do you think there's any danger of unscrupulous workers signing on as an agency with loads of different operators to then put employment tribunals in place? Have we left that open based under the code of practice at the moment, or?
It's quite possible. Yeah. There's no reason, I guess, that they couldn't do that. I think, they'll get caught out eventually. The tribunals work out they've got multiple claims, but or even before that with ACAS. But it's something to be aware of. I think even when we do get the practical guidance, there is still going to be a period before we get any sort of testing in any aspects of this legislation of employees or groups of employees that want to push it and say either quite rightly that they've been unjustly treated, or other end of the spectrum, like you suggest, Dan, where they might be just trying to make a quick buck out of this.
Yeah. And in terms of how your businesses are preparing, Danielle and Chris, Danielle, you specifically mentioned this has not been a short-term project at Revolutions. It's been a long-term project to make sure that you're getting everything in line for July the 1st previously. What kind of further preparation is there needed at your end to manage this now?
So, I mean, our work really in terms of anticipation of this act started probably March, April last year. We were engaged with you guys for a trial in kind of July, August last year, as early as that, trying to get an understanding of the functionality first and foremost. What benefits are there that exist for our teams in some of that on-demand stuff that we don't currently have? I appreciate other businesses might, and we're about to go live with the real thing in terms of an implementation over the coming weeks. Now, in terms of extra preparation, we're kind of building some decks with some assets that have been provided by Tipjar for communication to our team, so they understand the nature of, you know, we're speaking about technicalities here, really, from an employer perspective. The Act in general, you know, the purpose of it, the 100% fair distribution, you know, it's the right thing and it's the right messaging, and it's just making sure that we capture that without any of the, you know, employer challenges tainting the messaging. So it's just about comms really now for us. That's our next step. Making sure we've obviously done various rounds of communication and feedback in determining what our employees want in terms of the trunk scheme and trunk rules. It will be, you know, naturally now we are going to have to kind of go out. We had a subsection for this is what we think the legislation might mean, but until final, you know, code of practice is issued, it's guesswork at the moment, I guess. So it's just refirming all of that back up, re-communicating, seeing if there are any changes on the back of that, and really hearing the team's feedbacks as to what you know, as Andy said, what they think in reference to the distribution, and yeah, going from there really.
Yeah, I love that. Revolution's Bar Group actually went through a good consultation process with their team, if I remember, in terms of looking at different trunk schemes. Are you happy to talk about that, or?
Yeah. I mean, we did do we launched with a proportion of our estate in the trial period that I referenced, and that allowed us to understand I guess reaction on an individual basis. We gave all of our team members the opportunity to feed into what they liked about a new tipping mechanism, what they didn't like about the new tipping mechanism. Again, our starting point is possibly different from many others in that we haven't previously operated a trunk, and therefore, you know, we've always had NICs applicable from a payroll perspective. So there is quite a change. It's not just which comes with a benefit, right? Especially for employees, we're taking that national insurance cost away from their net pay. They'll be better from a net pay basis. But there were some challenges due to kind of legacy distributions and how things had been determined in different sites. We engage with, you know, a large population of our general managers. We ultimately went out with two proposals, two mechanisms, which had been shortlisted from a lot of feedback in, and then where we, off the back of the second kind of consultation, we landed at where we landed for trunk for rollout.
Brilliant. Sounds great. And from your side of things, Chris, how has everything been communicated with your teams, and how have they engaged with what you're doing with regards to the new trunk policy at Grosvenor?
Well, you're talking at a company that's 500 people rather than many thousand, so it's slightly different. We've been selling in the fact that we've been doing this anyway, but the transparency's there, and it's going to be positive in terms of things like they'll be able to access their trunk pot quicker via their wallets when we go live with the tip jar system in June, so that they will be able to know how much, rather than think they're going to get this much, they'll know how much is there much quicker. So selling it as a real positive. What we do is we have town halls every quarter. So we go out to the sites and they can ask us any question that they like. And we've actually been briefing this as a benefit in terms of something that's really positive for them. So it doesn't come as a shock. And it's also something that so when they hear tip jar, they hear linked in with S4, they can actually they realize that that's a positive and it's something they understand. We've also put it out in our communication by the mix that we have each week. That's like our internal magazine, but it's a digital magazine, and we also run it past the forum as well. So, you know, it's about keeping talking about it. So it's, we know about that. That's fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. I was a big fan of hearing about the town halls when Drew was speaking to us initially. And yeah, love that idea and concept about really speaking to the teams and getting their feedback. And it's great to hear that Rebs as well, when you were mentioning it then, Danielle, getting feedback from the teams is key to making sure the Tronc policies are right for the businesses, because every business is different. I don't think there is a Tronc policy that can be standard across every operation. So it's really good to see that you guys have been doing that. And in terms of, I mean, this is quite a big question. Any advice that you would give fellow operators in terms of managing everything on a tipping and a Tronc side of things? What would you both say to that? What advice would you give them?
I don't know about you, Danielle. I would say get in there quick. Don't leave it till the last minute. Just try and get ahead of the game, because I should imagine much more from a payroll perspective, but the devil's in the detail, isn't it? And getting it right and getting people's pay and Tronc is absolutely essential. So, but also not them being scared about it. It's actually quite logical. So,
Yeah, I would agree. And look, it's a very emotive topic for people. You know, for our team members, they instinctively will want to be heavily informed on anything reference their pay. So I think it's in terms of advice, it would be kind of communicate with the teams at the earliest opportunity, even if it's, we know this is coming, guys. We've got this. We'll be, you know, tucked again in due course, or whatever that looks like. My other kind of piece of advice would be simple is best. You know, there is a way to really overcomplicate this and make this really difficult for yourselves, but it doesn't have to be. So I think back to the core aim of what are we actually trying to do? You know, what is the purpose of this? Keeping it simple. And where possible, from my view, at arm's length. I do think that's important.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll come to Andy's final thoughts, but actually on advice for operators, Andy, what advice would you give them?
I'd echo what Danielle just said. I mean, less is more. There is no reason to overcomplicate. I think this whole journey of the last year or 18 months has really opened up a new chapter with staff. They're more engaged, they're more interested. It's good. There's less of this distrust, because Tronc can be, certain operators has been hidden and tucked away, and all you knew about it was what you got in your pay slip, where it came from, how it was calculated was, you know, just some sort of dark art, but you were glad to have the extra money. And you daren't question it. So I think it's all really good that staff are involved, interested, engaged, consulted, communicated with. You know, at the end of the day, it's their money. The guests, the customers are leaving it for the staff. So getting into this good regulated place with a level playing field is, you know, for me it's, you know, okay. We could all argue it's been a long time coming, but it's coming. So it's just something to embrace for me.
Yeah, I think there's some really good points there. I think actually when you look at it, it gives operators the chance to go back to traditional old school hospitality. And by old school hospitality, it means that the employees, the team members, can actually see the fruits of their labour. I think back to when I was an operator only 15 years ago and before that, well, yeah, actually it was a lot less than that, 10 years and before, like you would know what you were earning in terms of tips, and you knew that if you were looking after your customers and your guests, you were getting the rewards of that. And actually having these transparent and fair policies in place will hopefully show the team members that if they deliver in terms of customer experience and even upsells, that will generate more tips and Tronc for them as individuals and for the team. So everyone will benefit from that. So I think everything's hand in hand there. It'll help with employee engagement, employee retention, customer service and customer loyalty. So I think it does give us a really good opportunity, as opposed to just everyone being quite complacent that we know we're going to pick up 250 quid at the end of the month in terms of our tips and Tronc. This gives an opportunity for things to be done the right way and to reward great performance from a business standpoint as well.
I think about not just retention in the short midterm. It's changing the whole outlook on hospitality as being a career. You'll still get the ones that will come and they're working while they're at uni or something like that. But to show and demonstrate that this sector is really somewhere where you can apply yourself and work for the longer term. I think again it's fantastic.
Yeah, it was actually my reason for joining Tipjar. We had a quarterly hand up where we got all of the team together recently, and my number one point of why I joined Tipjar just 5-6 months ago is because I want hospitality to be seen as a career in the UK. I've had a career of 20 plus years in the sector, and I want parents to be able to say to their kids, go and have a career in hospitality, because you can go anywhere with it. Pay has always been the big problem, I think, from a parent standpoint. But this actually, like you said, Andy, there levels the playing fields and actually can help people see a genuine career in hospitality, and then they can move through the ranks, just as they do in America. In America, hospitality is very much seen as a career, and they earn very well from it. And hopefully this will give UK hospitality operators, employees that opportunity as well. In terms of, I think probably my final question for yourselves, Danielle and Chris, any support that you would like to see from the non-statutory guidance that will be released in the coming months as well? Anything else that you would like to see cleared up on that front?
Big one for me is the agency stuff. It's the practicality of, from the large kind of agencies to the very small local and everything in between. How does that, how does that coordinate with your rotoring system, your scheduling system, and your payment system? And yeah, that's the practicalities on what is specifically required.
I will back that up as well. You're either self-employed or you're employed, and it does seem to be a little bit still very vague. And I would like them to stick to a date. That they are actually going to introduce it on a set date. Hopefully, this is the final one.
What's your thoughts on that, Andy? Are you confident that will be the 1st of October based on what's been released?
I think it will be. As I say, it's going to go through Parliament now. If it's anything like the original bill, it'll sail through. It had cross-party support. Doesn't matter whether we have a general election next week or next month or in 3 months. It'll go through. I think to try and turn a negative into a positive, the fact they haven't published the non-statutory guidance might suggest that it's giving them a bit of a headache to get it together and get it right and refined. I would take some positivity from that rather than just sending out a document that perhaps is received and viewed as being as not much use. So let's see, and hopefully take some positivity from that. But sort of my view at the moment is, okay, we've got a delay from July to October. I wouldn't necessarily take your foot off the gas, so to speak. I think keep going. If you started your reviews, or you've nearly concluded your reviews of your systems and arrangements, finish it, even if you end up just putting it on the shelf for some weeks or a month or two. But certainly don't sort of put it to one side and forget about it. Remember, we're going to go into the typical summer period where people will certainly maybe in a head office environment might be going on holiday, and things get left and delayed. I'd just rather you carry on as an operator to push and get it. If you can go live in July, brilliant. If that was your original target date, even if it's August, but don't just park it to one side and then go into panic mode in September.
Brilliant. Are they your final thoughts, Andy, or any other thoughts that you'd like to?
I think it is. That's pretty much it for me. And that's the conversations I'm having with businesses. Is let's just keep going with this and get it out of the way and get it off the list, the agenda, so to speak. As I say, even if you park it and then come back to it at a later date, we know, other than the non-stat guidance, we know what we've got to work with now.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Andy, Danielle, and Chris, for joining us today and sharing your opinions and thoughts on the tipping legislation. Hopefully, this has been useful for the listeners and watchers of this webinar. Yeah, good luck with everyone over the coming months on transitioning.